stand up, stand up and take action. Stand up against, stand up against corruption. Stand up against it, stand up against it, stand up and take action. Showing the right way to go. Protect the value of human life. Don't sell your soul, don't compromise. We fight for the freedoms of mankind. CPI leading the fight. Let's unite, golden mind against the evil lurking in the shadows. Stand up against, stand up against corruption. Stand up against it, stand up and take action. Stand up against, stand up against corruption. Stand up against it, stand up against it, stand up and take action. Stand against corruption. Stand against it and take action. Stand against corruption. Stand against it, stand against it, stand and take action.
Nā koutou katoa, e hui nei, e tēnei wā. E mihi mahana ki a koutou, kua tai mai ki tēnei hui o Transparency International New Zealand. Tēnā koutou e mātanga o te moana nui a kiwa. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. Ko Julie Haggie takuingoa, ko kai whakahaere o Transparency International, Aotearoa. Greetings to you all. We are honoured by your attendance at our webinar today. Greetings to experts from across the Pacific countries. Talofa, Malolele, Nisabula, Kiorana, Hello, Olgeta, good day, Kaya, Wanya, and Diaduch, kia ora. I just start with a karakia from Aotearoa, which talks about the peace being widespread and the seas like greenstone to give us a pathway for today. Karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, hui e, tai ki e. So the first series, it's my honour to greet you today to the second of the 3 webinars in our 3 sets of webinars that we're holding to encourage information and courageous discussion with Pacific people, including in Aotearoa. Our aim is to improve understanding and transparency around some gnarly issues. This first series is focusing on financial integrity and how people use the financial systems of the Pacific, including New Zealand and Australia. Financial systems are critical to supporting businesses and economies, but some people and organisations use them so they can evade taxes, hide assets, and enable illegal trade in drugs, guns, etc. This affects us all and is currently affecting us all. Our first webinar looked at money laundering and about how anti-money laundering activity can help and civil society can help promote transparency and battle corruption. Reducing corruption is what Transparency International New Zealand and the global movement is all about. So today's session is about transnational organised crime in the Pacific. The Pacific used to be relatively free of organised crime, but now there are long fingers of evil using their illegal behaviour, including bribery and fraud, and we know the deadly impact that they have on our communities, and we know that in New Zealand, and people in the Pacific will know it as well. Our speakers are going to look at how organised crime operates across the Pacific, from hidden financial networks to state corruption. We'll hear about investigative journalism, policy innovation, law enforcement, and what role you can play. A big shout out to Jossa Nailati, whose anti-corruption song Stand Up drew us together today. Also acknowledgement to Rochelle Stewart-Allen, who has constructed these series of webinars, and to Grow, who are running the tech for this webinar. Also to the funders of the events, Transparency International, with funding provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. I'll hand over shortly to Jose Sousa-Santos, but just a couple of housekeeping rules that I'm sure we know already, but I will repeat them. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube site. Please keep your mute your microphones and generally keep your cameras off because it helps with connectivity. We've got a lot of people from a range of countries and some of them have quite tenuous connections. And if we get problems, we might have to do that independently. So this is an information sharing event. We assume a range of understanding.
Yours, not like mine, and
thanks. This is a range that we assume a range of understanding. So there's anything you don't understand, please ask a question. There are no dumb questions. We really need to have the kōrero. That's our main, the talking between us. That's our main aim for today. And we're very happy to field questions after the event. The last thing I want to say is our values at Transparency International are integrity, courage, transparency, respect, and non-partisanship. And we bring those values to this hui today. We respect different opinions. We can all learn from each other. So that's enough talk from me. I'm going to hand over to Jose. For those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting him, he is Associate Professor of Practice and leads the Pacific Regional Hub at the University of Canterbury. Throughout his academic life, he has researched and taught on transnational crime, regional security, and non-state actors in the Pacific Islands and Southeast Asia. With over 30 years of experience in civilian, security and defence sectors, he is a subject matter expert and a panel of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Crime. He is currently pursuing a PhD on the nexus between transnational crime and climate insecurity in the Pacific Island regions. So he is the man on the spot. I'm handing over to you, Jose. You might need just to unmute yourself.
Apologies. Kia ora koutou, Larandiak, and good morning. Thank you very much, Julie, for the karakia, and to Transparency International New Zealand for convening this important talanoa on transnational crime. Transnational crime is one of the most pressing threats in the Pacific to the stability, prosperity, and security in our region. Despite collective efforts spanning more than 3 decades, transnational organized crime continues to pose significant threats to Pacific nations, communities, and economies. As highlighted in the Pacific Islands Forum inaugural Regional Transnational Organized Crime Disruption Strategy 2024-2028, transnational organized crime has evolved dramatically, exploiting vulnerabilities across our region. It is pervasive and devastating, infiltrating every facet of our societies, endangering our communities, eroding trust in institutions, and undermining the very fabric of our Pacific way of life. The consequences are profound. The Pacific has experienced an alarming rise in drug-related crimes, social disintegration due to addiction, and the normalization of corruption as criminal networks seek to co-opt institutions designed to protect the public. Over the past week, for example, we have seen the impact of narco corruption in Fiji. The rise of the insider threat is a useful barometer for measuring the evolution of Pacific criminal syndicates. The urgency for a revitalized and Pacific-led approach has never been clearer. Tackling transnational crime in the Pacific demands a multifaceted approach from regional institutions through to civil society, traditional power structures, the church, and academia. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our 3 speakers, who have each contributed to deepening our understanding of transnational crime in the Pacific region and across their respective areas of policy, media, and research. Our first speaker is Mr. Tevita Tupou, who is one of the region's leading experts in transnational crime and border security, and who has played a critical role on the front lines in strengthening regional governance systems. Tevita is currently the Trade Customs Advisor with UNCAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and has held previous roles with IOM, the Bali Process, and the Oceanic Customs Organization, as well as teaching and lecturing at the University of the South Pacific. Our second speaker is Mr. Aubrey Belford, the Pacific editor and expert for the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Aubrey's reporting exposes the nexus between organised crime, corruption, and political influence, and demonstrates the critical, valuable role that media plays in combating organised crime. Aubrey has previously reported for Reuters, the New York Times, and Agence France Presse. Our third and final speaker is Ms. Virginia Comolli, and she's head of the Pacific Program at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, where she leads research on organised crime and governance in the Pacific, including policy responses and regional collaboration, key to our response to transnational organised crime. Amplifying the importance of evidence-based research to inform policy. Virginia has spent over a decade working on conflict, security, and transnational crime globally with the IISS. We are thrilled to have over 100 participants online, and I encourage everyone who has joined us to submit questions and comments to the panel and to participate in this important conversation. Please, Tevita, over to you.
Thank you, Jose, and Bula Vinaka, everyone from Suva. Like what Jose said, my name is Tevita Tupou. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Transparency New Zealand for giving us the opportunity to be able to share on the transnational organised crime. And like what Jose said, the impact is far-reaching. And also like to acknowledge my colleagues who are speakers, Virginia and Jose, who's here with us. And to all partners and friends, colleagues across the Pacific that's here with us, sharing the burden of dealing with organised crime. I thought of not presenting. I've got 10 minutes to share with you around policy and legislation, but I thought I'll throw in some of the broad aspect side of things, and then we'll set the discussion for us. And I'm sure, given the composition of those that are here with us this morning, you are fairly aware of some of the things that are happening. But let me just start by saying, with the rapid change that not only is happening across the globe, but also happening across the region, there are three things. There are three key things that shape the way we do things. Whether it's and this is global, and the Pacific is not new to this, and it also shapes who we are as Pacific as a region, and nationally and institutionally for all agencies that deal with TOC, transnational organised crime. And that is the flow of goods, the flow of people, and the information flow. For the last 500 years, these three things, and then the fourth one is financial flow. These four things hasn't changed. What has changed, however, is the volume of those flows, the impact of those flows, and the rate of those flows. The volume of trade, the volume of travel, and the financial flows. And if you look at the policies that we have now, any legislation, whether it's the US or any part of the Pacific, all legislation are crafted to be able to either manage, control, or facilitate these flows. Any legislation in the world, and the Pacific is not immune to this. Everyone does that. The challenging part to all of this is how organised crime has latched onto it, has used the legitimate programs within trade, within financial flow, to morph itself, and that is a global challenge. And that's the reason I didn't want to put up the gaps, the legal gaps. If you look at the trade policy gap across the Pacific, we are up there. We're quite good. If you look at the legal gaps or the policy gaps around some of the security components, we're not far off. And one must also understand that it's not just the legal gap on its own. Like what Jose said, this is a multifaceted issue. It needs to be addressed from all fronts. You know, if you look at crimes that are committed in Australia and New Zealand, there's always an international dimension to it. If you look at our policies now, our policies, our legislation were developed post all of these things that were happening. It was developed pre-digital. It was developed pre-network, pre-global platforms. Organized crime now is borderless. Our young people are tech savvy. You know, our laws are fragmented and it's outdated. The question for us, you know, it's the silence in some of our laws and the level of vulnerability that it creates. That's some of the things that we really need to bring on and understand. Another huge challenge is the prosecutional teeth that human trafficking has. And I'm just giving you some examples. And yet we have porous borders. You know, while cartels use our waters as transshipment highway, we continue to treat drug offenses as local issues. And we've seen that in Fiji. You know, when it comes to environmental crime, illegal logging, wildlife smuggling, overfishing, our law is very reactive. You know, it's not designed to be preventative. So the question we ask ourselves, you know, and Jose highlighted some of these things around recent cases and recent events of how things are happening. The way we approach TOC now is it's prosecutional based, and everyone does it. But we also understand you cannot prosecute your way out of this problem. You cannot shoot your way out of your drug problem. You can fill up all the prisons in the Pacific and these guys will keep smiling and coming. You can have the best policy in the world. You know, the challenge for us is, are we bold enough to rethink this? Are we bold enough to rewrite the rules that governs our system in the Pacific? It's really challenging our system because our very system that we have is being used against us. We have lawyers that TOC use. These are high-priced lawyers. They have the resources to pay for high-priced lawyers. They have funds to use accounting firms to work for them. They're the enablers of crime. And I say this very boldly because we might not see it in the Pacific, but these are some of the things that really shape how things are. And this is way more than how the funds that they have can fund half of all customs police agencies in the Pacific. You know, we don't have the resources to do that. They're building and bringing it down to capability, bringing it down to processes and procedures to be able to combat some of these things. These are some of the reality that we really need to front up to. And we can't do it lying down. But it's not all doom and gloom. You know, our strength as Pacific Islanders is our collective resilience. How do we find that? Who do we look to? Is it our leaders? Is it our police? Is it immigration? Because let me just say this, 90% of the information that law enforcement use comes from the private sector. But what's the level of coordination do we have with private sector? What's the level of harmonization does law enforcement have with private sector? When we talk about disruption, when we talk about financial crime, all of this information comes from the private sector. But it's only when you sprinkle intelligence to it, the need to know and the need to share begins to come in. Our very own system does not allow us to be able to combat organized crime to the fullest. And it also undermines our strength, our collective strength institutionally and our strength across. I'll leave it at that. I like to give time for us to have Q&A, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you so much, Tevita, especially for the insight into the nexus between the flow of goods, financial flows, and transnational organized crime, which is not very often thought about or spoken about, as people tend to look at transnational organized crime more on the practical sense of what sort of what shines in the newspapers. So some of the points that you made, which really resonated with me, was that you cannot prosecute your way out of the problem, and I think that's that's something that is normally an approach from Western nations, is that you prosecute, you arrest, use law enforcement. But as conversation that we've had previously in the past, that's well and true when you have the legislation to back that up. Another point that we made, we're bold enough to rethink this and rewrite the rules, especially when you're looking at the regional security architecture and law enforcement architecture. What are the solutions? I think that's just brilliant. You encapsulated an aspect of transnational organised crime that no one really looks at. So thank you very much, Tevita, and I'd like to pass this on to Aubrey now. Aubrey?
Thank you, Jose. Hi, everyone. My name is Aubrey Belford. So I am the lead Pacific editor for the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. And there are slides, just waiting for them to come up. But basically what we are is a network of independent investigative journalists. Is it possible to move the slides along? Okay, next slide, please. Well, the formatting's gone crazy. I don't know what's happening there. All right, I'll just talk. So we are, yes, as I said, a network of independent investigative journalists. We're the largest network of journalists. We started about 15 years ago, slightly over 15 years ago in Eastern Europe, and have since spread all over the world. We're funded by a mix of government grants and also non-government grants, the big sort of grant-giving foundations in the United States and Europe, things like that. We don't work for any donor. We pursue our own agenda, and our main offices are in Amsterdam, Washington, D.C., and Sarajevo. We started in the Pacific in 2021. I'm Australian. You might have heard from my voice, and I apologize. I sound hungover. I'm not. I was sick on the weekend. So it's just, yeah, a little bit of congestion. But yes, I'm Australian, but I lived most of my adult life overseas in Southeast Asia and in Eastern Europe as a journalist. But we got a grant back in 2021 to set up a Pacific Islands program. And the reason that we put together this program and the reason that donors started looking into the Pacific is because there's a realization, as Tevita laid out, that organized crime and corruption is really growing in this region. And this is really a region where societies and governments are just not terribly prepared to deal with this. This hasn't been a big problem before. So the reason why we as journalists, can we try the next slide, please? See if that one works. So the reason why we as journalists, okay, the formatting's up. My slide looked really nice. I don't know what happened to it, but the reason why we as journalists are very effective at dealing with corruption is the same reason why civil society is very effective. And it's the same reason why, my apologies for everyone here who are from your various national governments, the reason why governments struggle so much with crime and corruption is that, again, as Tevita laid out really convincingly, is that organized crime and corruption is networked and it is global and it is massive and it is sophisticated. There is an industry of facilitators there that are, accountants and lawyers that are very well paid and very good at what they do, and understand the systems that they are rigging, often in ways better than the government people who are, there to try and stop them. And most importantly, law enforcement and other government agencies are constricted by borders. If you start investigating some criminal operation in your country, be they drug traffickers or people smugglers, whoever they are, as soon as one piece of the puzzle happens to be outside of your country's borders, then everything gets very difficult. You have to send a mutual legal assistance request to another country, wait 6 months for them to write back and say, oh yeah, okay, what do you want? And then it's another 6 months, back and forth. It slows things down a lot. What journalists and civil society groups like TI do is that, sorry, that's the leftover sickness from the weekend. What we do is we use the fact that we are not constrained by these same issues. That we are able to work together across borders seamlessly without bureaucracy, using large amounts of information and analyzing that, sharing our expertise. I mean, if I'm working with a journalist from Fiji and a journalist from Slovakia on a story at the same time, they both have the necessary contacts and context and skills to understand those bits of the story. And then us working together, we're able to understand these things very well. The work is also not like the journalism that you might be familiar with. The classic image of a reporter with a microphone going up to someone and saying, sir, I heard that, you stole money from this road building contract. What do you say about that? It's about collecting documentary evidence, contracts, corporate ownership records, going through court records from other countries, various leaks that come out on the internet, and then, assembling this and building something that is very convincing and coherent. And that is something that then civil society groups like TI can then build advocacy off, and also something that governments can build policy off, and law enforcement can build prosecutions off. So what we try and do is, we apply journalistic rigor to our reporting. We don't try and take sides, we stay objective, but we try and put stories out there that are good enough, that are accurate enough and detailed enough that other people who are empowered to actually do something about them can do something about them. So our stories have helped governments around the world claw back billions of dollars in money that's been lost through corruption. We've helped expose a lot of different kind of criminal networks, schemes and operations and methodologies. And so we really see ourselves as kind of like a people's, public, almost intelligence service, trying to just get that information into the public sphere so that people are empowered to act on it. Can we try the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just an idea of the scale of who we are. Missing again a bit of the slide, but I think you get where we're going at with this. We are a coalition of independent media organizations around the world. And I chose this selection because there's lots of interesting looking alphabets here. Some squiggly ones that I think, some of you might not have seen before. Like we've got down the bottom there is Azeri, which is like they do upside down backwards E's and apostrophes in the middle of things, and it's all kind of crazy. But these are all of our partner organizations. These are just some of our partner organizations. We have dozens and dozens of partner media around the world, in Africa, in South America, in the Caucasus, in Central Asia. We work with exiled media from Russia. We have Chinese journalists that we work with, who I won't tell you who they are or where they are, but they work with us on these things. And so we're able to pool a very vast amount of knowledge and expertise. We also analyze, very large data sets, which are very complex, hard things to do, that often law enforcement struggle with, even in very rich developed countries. And in places like the Pacific, that's even more challenging. And then next slide, please. Let's see if this one works. Also in the Pacific, we've built up a network. So I noticed actually that Ofani from In-Depth Solomons is attending. I saw him pop up in the chat. So In-Depth Solomons is one of our partners inside PNG. We also work quite a lot with the Fiji Times and other media as well, but these are our sort of three main friends in the region. Both In-Depth Solomons and Inside PNG are very new independent outlets that were started by journalists in Solomons and PNG because they felt that the media was failing to be independent in their countries. And we've helped these guys get on their feet, and we work with them on investigations. because again, these are the guys who know what issues there are in their countries and, know what the stories are and hear the rumors. But, we are there to help with how to get things up to an evidentiary standard, how to access different data sets that might be somewhere else, say in Singapore or in the US or Hong Kong or in Europe. And we've done some really great things together. If we go on, I'll just give a couple of ideas. Okay, this is missing the headline again. I don't know what's going on. I wanted to give a couple of examples of the stories we've done. Sometimes the stories are very local and sometimes they're global. So I thought this is a good example. What this actually was talking about is Chinese organized crime influence in the Pacific has been one major big global theme that we've been reporting on for the last few years. And this again speaks to what Tevita was talking about, that these big forces are now at play. This wasn't such a big issue in the region a while ago. It's definitely not the only form of organized crime in the region, but it's something that's very poorly understood in the region because, I mean, firstly, because everyone's speaking Chinese. And so a lot of people don't actually realize what's going on. So we've actually done, I realize this second thing there is a bit out of date. We haven't done 3 stories. We've done a lot more than 3 stories. I forgot to replace that line. But what we've been looking at is that you have very sophisticated criminal networks that are either based out of, places like China, Hong Kong, Macau, or Chinese criminal networks operating in Southeast Asia that are heavily involved in money laundering, human smuggling, and drugs. And if you're looking at the global sort of criminal world right now, Chinese organized crime really is up there as arguably the biggest factor now. I mean, if you're looking just in terms of the money, because they also move money for South American, Central American, Mexican drug cartels. They're involved in everything. And when we look at the Pacific drug trade, again, Chinese organized crime is very significant in the Pacific drug trade. And we've had stories out there, we found that this guy down in the bottom corner, his name's Broken Tooth. He's a senior triad leader from Hong Kong who has been involved in, he tried to set up a casino in Palau. He showed up all over the region. He showed up in Bougainville, which is, I don't know how he decided to turn up in Bougainville. This guy is a very famous gangster in China, household name. We found again, influence efforts by the Chinese government in Solomon Islands. In Marshall Islands, we looked into a scheme by some Chinese fraudsters that may have had some relations to the Communist Party to create a special economic zone that would have been basically a sovereign entity within the country. In Fiji, we've done a few stories about the most prominent Chinese businessman in the country, who is the sort of closest related to the Chinese government there. He's their most trusted person and is also suspected by the Australian Federal Police as being a senior figure in the drug trade. So, these are very complicated things and, local journalists are not well equipped on their own to look into them. Firstly, because they don't speak Chinese. So this is where journalists can come in and help. And when we get these stories out, then we can also help build this awareness and allow for governments to act on it. If we do the next slide, I don't know what's going to come up on this one. Okay. Then, we've also worked with journalists on very local stories. So this is what we did with Ofani and his team in Solomon Islands, where, we worked with them to go through public records to look into something that a lot of people have been talking about, but didn't really understand, which was Manasseh Sogavare's sudden and unexplained increase in property wealth. Honiara is not a big town. People know whose houses are where. but they couldn't necessarily see over the fence, especially that one in the bottom left corner. And they don't know how much these houses cost or where the money came from. So we worked with these guys to get drones up in the air, take photos, get the records, and work out how much these houses are worth, and where the financing came from. And the answer is mortgages that Sogavare and his family can't afford, and would not have been able to get without some other financial wherewithal, which we still haven't been able to find. But this is kind of an example of again, where journalists working together, even on a local story, where international connections and collaborations can help bring something out that is really in the public interest. So yeah, that's everything from me. But I'd be really happy to join in the discussion later. Also, if everyone can check the chat, I did put my contacts in there because I wouldn't be a self-respecting journalist without just throwing that out there and just saying that, you can reach out to me anonymously, you can leak stuff to me. I'll welcome it. So, or if you just want to chat. Yeah.
Aubrey, thank you for demonstrating the critical role of media and this type of investigative reporting, especially the unbiased research and investigation that you bring into the landscape. This is really important in exposing corruption and organised crime and bridging the knowledge gap. I think during Q&A, it's important that we can dig deeper into the challenges for media in the Pacific in pursuing these stories on organised crime, but also the impact and the dangers that the reporters and journalists in this field face. And now we look forward to hearing from Ms. Virginia Comolli. Thank you very much, Virginia.
Well, thank you, Jose, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be part of this panel. So thank you again to Transparency International New Zealand for the kind invitation. So very briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with my organization, so the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, we are now the single largest civil society organizations committed to analyzing and responding to illicit economies, and we produce a huge amount of research on different criminal actors and markets, but we also look at policy and other forms of responses, and including building resilience among local civil societies in the most affected countries by organized crime. So today I'll be discussing the insights from a recent brief that we produced that really looks at building resilience to organized crime in the Pacific Islands. And this brief basically was the concluding output in a series of papers that we have put together looking at transnational organized crime in the Pacific Islands and really highlighting this surge in criminal activities that we've seen over the past few years. And this is very much driven by the actions of foreign criminals, as we've heard, for instance, from Aubrey. And we are talking about both traditional type criminals, but also private sector actors, as well as other actors that have political connections, both in their countries of origin and also they're developing them in the Pacific. And linked to all of this, of course, were very mindful in the course of our research of the geopolitical competition that is now ongoing, or that has been ongoing for a while in the region, that also creates vulnerabilities that fuel the growth of transnational crime, for instance, by creating new opportunities for criminals to exploit, and also the impact that this geopolitical competition has on crime fighting efforts. Next slide, please. So with all of these in mind, there are some issues that we came across that really hinder the fight against transnational crime. First is that in some countries, there might be a reluctance sometimes to pursue foreign criminals or their local enablers for fear of undermining political or diplomatic relationships. But this means that basically some well-known criminal actors or corrupt officials become effectively untouchable, of course, and that's highly problematic. The other issue is that despite all the evidence that we have been gathering over the past several years about, a growth in criminality in some countries in the Pacific, maybe organized crime is not prioritized as highly as perhaps it should be, and some countries might still see themselves as near transit points. The other issue, of course, we hear this all the time, is to do with capacity and, law enforcement agencies. They might have, limited budgets. They might lack some technical knowledge around some particular skills. They might lack, boats. There will be a scarcity of prosecutor in a particular country. So that, of course, is a serious limitation. And along with that is also there are also limitations within the judiciary, which certainly needs further support and strengthening. And a final gap or issue really is the fact that we have different partners to the Pacific Islands providing law enforcement capacity building that might sometimes they might have sometimes contrasting approaches to policing. I'm thinking, for instance, think of the training that Australia might be providing to a local police force in the Pacific versus the training that the Chinese might be providing. And they have, of course, very different approaches. And this raises questions around interoperability and other issues as well. Next slide, please. But, after, discussing these issues / problems, this is all not negative. There are, in fact, some opportunities that we can capitalize on. I think this is the chance for shifting perspectives, really acknowledging the pervasive impacts of organized crime on the economy, development, security, health, the environment, governance. This is crucial. And really recognizing how crime undermines the overall resilience of a country, that's a really important first step. And linked to this, the argument that we put forward is the one of actually framing discussions around organized crime through the lens of resilience. And in a way, this approach is less confrontational and less risky to diplomatic relationships. It's really about presenting resilience as the antibody against organized crime. So basically helping countries withstand the repercussions of organized crime and also develop long-term barriers. And obviously, we are not arguing to eliminate law enforcement, not at all. I mean, this resilience-centered approach actually strengthens cooperation between law enforcement and civil society actors, and really it engages communities to build their understanding of the rule of law and also human rights. There are also opportunities represented by existing regional bodies. Jose already made reference to the regional security architecture. So there are so many existing regional organizations that in their own different capacities have responsibility for the fight against transnational organized crime, from obviously the Pacific Islands Chief of Police, from the Pacific Islands forums, etc., etc. So really there is no need for new structures, but really the emphasis should be on working with and through these existing networks to leverage established cooperation channels. And in this, I think there is also an opportunity to strengthen a cross-sectoral approach. Really, countering crimes requires different sectors, different disciplines just to come together, at the international, regional, and national, a local level. Having kind of looked at these challenges and opportunities, we have run also consultations with Pacific experts, and we have identified 3 areas, interconnected areas for building resilience and countering entrenched foreign criminal actors. And I'd like now to go into those 3 areas. Next slide, please. The first one, and it very much echoes many of the things that Aubrey had said, has to do with supporting the media. I mean, a free independent media, of course, is vital for investigating crime. Think of all the amazing investigation that OCCRP has conducted and its partners too. And really it's fundamental in order to hold authorities accountable and also raising awareness about the population about what is happening, because through this investigation we can see how networks and operations and individuals involved in crime and corruption can be exposed, and also the impacts on the communities. I think the media is also an important role to play in terms of joining forces and partnering up with NGOs to amplify their voices and also extend their reach. Obviously, there are challenges, including, political and economic pressures the media might be coming under. There might be, weak legal protections for the media, and we know lots of stories of journalists coming under threat. They're really playing a key role, but also in a very challenging environment. And donors really can make a difference by promoting, quality journalism and supporting technical training for Pacific journalists specifically. Next slide, please. The second area that we've identified with, during our consultation for resilience building is to do with strengthening transparency and data sharing. We know transparency is key to building resilience, and open access to information can empower communities. So providing easier access, for instance, to company ownership information makes it harder for criminals to hide their illicit activities and assets. And of course, it helps investigations and it deters corruption. Also, by governments can, increase their transparency when it comes to crime statistics, corruption cases, and the effectiveness of their responses. And this, by increasing the transparency around these things, this helps communities assess the situation and also hold power to account. And of course, the transparent communication about crime prevention strategies also enables, more informed participation on the part of the population. One other area that really came across quite strongly in this respect was about having open procurement processes, which is a way to minimize corruption opportunities. And civil societies themselves, benefit from being more transparent about their activities, their funding as streams, as a way of building trust in their work. And the final point here is to do with establishing or the importance of secure and confidential mechanism for reporting wrongdoing, which is really, really essential to build transparency in the region and everywhere. Next slide, please. The third area for resilience building is to do with building the capacity of civil society. Civil society actors play a key role in connecting communities and institutions, and also campaigning for change and holding power to account. And they are on the front line, in fact, of building community resilience. And we've identified 5 areas where civil society actors can contribute to, already do contribute to resilience building. They support community-based interventions, they implement programs working with the youth, addressing, local vulnerabilities, campaigning for victims, and so on. They support victims and survivors of crimes. They can campaign for legislations that ensure that victims are supported. They also can advocate for prison reform and for rehabilitation-focused approaches, alternatives to incarceration. They have a key role to play around land rights, working with communities on developing sustainable land management, campaigning for modern land administration systems, and to deter exploitation. And this is particularly relevant for those countries that see lots of illegal logging happening on customary land, such as Solomons and PNG. And also CSO can, through their fundraising activities, they can, secure more, sustainable long-term funding, and building networks with other activists, with other journalists, NGOs, and facilitating these exchanges. And this is something that we have been experiencing at the Global Initiative through our Resilience Fund program, which we've been running for 5 years. That really helps us supporting and bringing together civil society actors and sharing their knowledge. So next, my final slide. So after having identified these three priority areas for resilience building, so supporting the media, strengthening transparency, and building civil society capacity, let me just conclude with some recommendations. We've targeted our recommendation for three different audiences. So, I mean, for Pacific leaders, really this idea of prioritizing organized crime as a strategic challenge to stability, governance, development, and not just the law enforcement issues. And then openly also addressing the links between crime, corruption, and also political elites. And also strengthen transparency by enacting and implementing strong laws on access to information and ensuring public access to data. And also support, the non-state actors, support civil societies and protect, independent media and civil society organizations. Turning to development partners, and especially here I'm thinking about more the traditional partners or donors, we would encourage them to really frame engagements on organized crime through a resilience approach that complements law enforcement efforts, and also move beyond a state-centric engagement that normally prioritize dealing with government counterparts in favor to actually directly supporting and empowering civil society organizations through funding, technical assistance, and training. Of course, support for the media and through funding and training initiatives that we've discussed already. Also improve coordinations, because we've heard so many times during our consultations how oftentimes there is a duplication of efforts, and sometimes the usual suspects are those receiving support while some are constantly being left out. And really doing this also by or working through existing structures, so really strengthening existing regional institutions and their coordination, and really do this by adopting a very culturally sensitive approach, given that we're talking about very sensitive issues around corruption, particularly, but at the same time, don't let geopolitical competition completely overshadow tackling crime and corruption. And finally, for civil societies, of course, for those of you from, represented in the audience, really just continue that work on the front line that you are doing and maintaining your vital role in community engagement, campaigning, victim supports, etc. Utilize any access to information that might already be available and that might become available in the future to expose these illicit activities that continue raising awareness, and also collaborate with others, civil society like journalists and activists, and also internationally to share knowledge, and also as a way to explore diverse sources of funding, and also to advocate for more sustainable funding for resilience initiatives. So I know I appreciate it's quite a lot that I'm covering here. So really just to recap, effectively countering transnational crime in the Pacific requires, we argue, a shift towards building resilience, empowering local actors, and fostering transparency and accountability. And I think we think this approach is crucial given the complex interplay of foreign criminality, geopolitical competition, and also domestic vulnerabilities that we can see in the Pacific Islands. And in all of this, supporting community-based structures and traditional governance systems can be leveraged effectively and in order to build resilience. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion and your feedback. Thank you. You are on mute, Joseph.
Of course I am. Thank you, Virginia, for your excellent synopsis on the issues and for advocating resilience as the antibody to organised crime, including through supporting a free, independent media, strengthening transparency and data sharing, and building the capacity of civil society actors and networks. But I think importantly, what's brought by the deep research-based and analytical policy advice and recommendations to the region and partners. I think that will help to drive the way forward in regards to transnational crime and how partners and the region can engage and give the partners a bit more of an understanding of what's required in the region and that empirical data which is missing in driving policy. So once again, Virginia, thank you very much. And I would, now that we have maybe 5 minutes before Q&A, I would like to ask all three speakers to consider reflecting on your experience. What are the three most critical issues or challenges you see in your area of work? And what are the responses or actions we need to be supporting and advocating for? Tevita?
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. And again, I must thank my colleagues for just, laying it all out there with what you've said. But I think for us, in everything that we've said, it requires, in my view, a total rethink of the approach that we're taking. We operate within a system that was designed that we thought would work for us. And if you take trade, if you take our legal system itself, we know, and I say this with a lot of caution, because it's designed to for transparency, it's designed for predictability, all of those human rights element. But the very people that we're fighting against, they know this. They leverage off the gaps that are in there. And we've seen this across the region. We've just seen one 2 days ago, happening across. So for me, it's really coming back to that. It's the question we ask our leaders, the question we ask ourselves: are we bold enough to rethink our fight against organized crime? We all came together for climate change. Everybody came together. But can we do the same for organized crime? Because if not, we'll continue with this cycle. We'll be asking the same question 10 years down the line. The problems is far worse than what it is now. Sorry, I thought that it's important that you ask, and you know that I'll say that again.
Thank you, Tevita. I think you got that right on the button. I still remember, I think it might have been 10 years ago, you and I sitting in the front of the PIFs in Fiji at the coffee shop and having a discussion about this. And I remember the comment that we came up with was that transnational crime is going to be the battle or the war of our generation, and that the leaders weren't aware of the fact that it wasn't just going to affect this current generation, but it's also going to affect their children and their grandchildren. And 10 years later, this is where you are now. So thank you, Tevita, for those points. And Aubrey, if you could.
I mean, my point's basically the same. I think there is still a large amount of complacency around crime and corruption in the region. I think from societies, from the media, from regional governments, and including the international organizations and the big donor countries, countries like Australia that likes to act like the big important hegemon in the region, but is actually fairly hopeless on this issue. A lot of things are swept under the carpet in the interests of just keeping people happy and keeping regional elites happy. In aid, I can say, for example, Australia's big investments in PNG is a good example. There's seemed to be this geopolitical game there. And so, big infrastructure projects have been agreed to that don't appear to really be taking corruption risks into account very seriously. And, there's just this idea that you keep everyone happy and, you don't rock the boat too much. and things will kind of work out. When in fact, by allowing corruption to fester, you build up the systems and networks that allow societies to be undermined from the inside. You see now with there are certain countries in the world that are very good at weaponizing corruption as an element of statecraft. Russia is one of these countries, which isn't so relevant for this region. But China also uses corruption as an element of building its influence. They seek to corrupt elites in different countries, and use those corrupt relationships they've built to forward their geopolitical aims. And those systems of corruption that they are riding off, that culture of corruption that is built up, is something that has been allowed to develop during this time when everyone thought that everything was just fine and dandy in the region. So I think, yeah, the big challenge is actually waking up. And from the media perspective, it's the media has to be more critical. Journalists have to be braver. And there are definitely some really great shining examples of that, but there's also a lot of complacency that still hasn't been shaken off.
Thank you, Aubrey. I think one of the good points that you made there in regards to the web of corruption that goes across not just the region, but I think also how that leads on to and facilitates foreign interference, foreign influence, and disruptive behavior in the region, which is sometimes not looked at, but how it's also linked towards transnational organized crime. Thank you very much. And Virginia?
Yeah, I'm afraid I won't be original, because actually I very much agree what you, the three of you just said. And actually this series of papers that we produce looking at foreign criminal actors active in the Pacific Islands, of course, emphasize the foreign dimension, which goes beyond the criminal activities, and it enters the realm of political influence and interference, as you just mentioned. And this is a massive problem, because of course we are seeing increase in the magnitude and the scale of the crimes, that organized crimes that we see in the Pacific, but also has a massive impact on responses. I lost count of the times during interviews that we done on the ground where some law enforcement officers would say, well, we know that person X and Y is involved in A, B, and C criminal activities, but we are not even going to think about starting an investigation. Sometimes it's because they get instructions from above, from the political leadership, that person should not be disturbed. But also there are other factors, I have to say, given the close-knit nature of Pacific communities where everyone is related to everyone else. Sometimes, the risk of ruining or undermining family relationships or community relationships might deter officers from investigating members of their communities. But for me, the main thing is that geopolitical dimension that also leads to these competition among partners to the Pacific Islands. If country A offers training to a particular Pacific country, then country B will offer a training plus a boat. And then country A will offer training plus a boat plus another boat. And this goes on. And oftentimes what is delivered is not necessarily what is needed in the Pacific Islands, because the absorption capacity might not be there, the technical expertise might not be there. So sending officers from Pacific Island countries to attend some foreign training or some advanced cyber investigation techniques might look good from a promotional perspective, but when they go back and don't have access to computers, for instance, or limited access to computers, it means that training cannot be put into practice. So you have to ask question, what was the purpose of it? Is it more to show that the partner paying for this training is actually outdoing other donors, or is it actually for the benefit of Pacific Islands? And sorry, I don't mean to be entirely cynical and negative, because lots of the training actually goes to good use, and but sometimes there is duplication of efforts, and some of the things that are delivered are not necessarily what are the actual priorities on the ground.
Thank you so much, Virginia. You reminded me of a time in 2019 when I was researching my report on international organised crime, and I was talking to a Pacific officer, and he said to me, we know who is behind this. We know, where the webs are. I said, but I have a family to think about, and I have to keep my family safe. So thank you very much. We have some fantastic questions waiting for our three speakers. So I hope you're ready to be put to the grill by our audience. And I think the first one is directed towards Tevita. And it's a request. Tevita, could you please talk more about focusing on prevention and disrupting criminal networks? For example, would it involve increasing collaboration or having civil asset forfeiture options?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that question. And I think when we talk about civil forfeiture or asset forfeiture, it's first we start with what we have, and I tell you, Fiji and a lot of the Australia, New Zealand you've got already in place the ability to do that, to do asset forfeiture, to do unexplained wealth. There's a whole right across the Pacific. A lot of the Pacific Islands have that provisions within the legislation. The question is, why is it not being used? Because the only reason why these guys are in the game is because there's a lot of money to be made. And when you hit them where it hurts the most, you'll begin to change the approach. They know which part of the Pacific they can exploit the vulnerability in terms of legal loopholes. They know that. But for us, if you have to coordinate the effort, you have to harmonize this across. It just, we've got PIFs, we've got capability or the platform to be able to use all of these things. But again, I go back to what I said earlier. To truly disrupt this, to truly create a dent, we've got to find something that's catalytic, and disruption using things like this. And I wish I would show you the slide. A lot of the countries, like 80% of the countries, they already have that, but it's the enforcement of it, and then you really can't force them to enforce some of these things, because the gaps in the capability that varies across. But yeah.
Thank you, Tevita. We've got a comment, which is that I like the be sensitive recommendation. Immigrants can be unfairly discriminated against within the banking sector when it comes to CML. Improved staff training in this respect is needed. I think that's a good comment. But I've got a question for Virginia. You mentioned resilience as an antibody against TNOC. Could you elaborate on what specific capabilities or partnerships you see as most critical to building that resilience in practice?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think there is really those three areas that I mentioned in my presentation in terms of building the increasing transparency and data sharing, the supporting or building the capacity of civil societies, and also supporting the media. And I think all these actors, especially within the civil society sector, which includes the journalists, includes human rights activists, environmental defenders, women's associations, youth groups, etc., etc. I think also by working together and joining forces, actually they can actually lead to greater results and really have their voices amplified. And also, I think what we are basically experiencing running these program called Resilience Fund for the past 5 years is really the benefit across the world. It's really the benefit of bringing different civil society actors together so they can actually share knowledge and experience, from other regions. Because, some countries might have, more established or more advanced, civil society sectors compared to others. So there is that sharing of knowledge that is very important. And I have to say, our you know, the kind of the driver behind this work we've been doing on resilience, this resilience approach in the Pacific, was really kind of the understanding that of all the complexities that, you know, applying a more traditional law enforcement only approach actually bring about, not least because of, you know, the political interference, geopolitical competition that we were talking about a moment ago. So we are trying to find, you know, alternative options, trying to be creative. And if, like, a donor, a partner finds it uncomfortable to bring up with the local counterparts issues of corruption, because they don't want to upset people, actually maybe there is a way around it, and through adopting a more kind of resilience-oriented approach and actually supporting more the civil societies as opposed to focusing exclusively on state actors.
Thank you for your great answer, Virginia. The next question, I believe that Aubrey has done some really good research into this, and it's, you know, what types of environmental crime are you seeing that's related to transnational organized crime? And I think people don't really think of that, about that very often. Aubrey?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't say we've managed to really get super far on this, but you know, environmental crime is transnational organized crime. You know, the majority of environmental crime is intended to supply, you know, global demand for commodities. So we're talking about in the Pacific, you know, this is mining, forestry, and fisheries predominantly. Yeah, we've seen some pretty brazen stuff going on. You know, one of the stories that we just did up in PNG, there's a lot of illegal alluvial gold mining in Morobe province. And you know, one of the workers at one of these foreign companies, that in Morobe, they're mostly Chinese companies, it appears. You know, he managed to get to PNG, get a work permit and everything. They were doing this illegal mine, you know, a little way out from Leh, that, you know, local landowners were absolutely furious at, but nothing seemed to happen. And, you know, it all seemed to unravel for him because he got into an argument with another guy at the site, you know, another Chinese guy, and pulled a gun on him. And so the guy, you know, reported him to police, and he's got charged for firing this gun, illegal weapons, whatever. But then we looked into it, and you know, turns out he came fresh out of prison in China. He was in Ghana doing the same stuff, illegal mining, but he was also basically a loan shark there, small scale organized crime guy. And you know, he was kidnapping people, torturing them, got arrested, extradited to China. They locked him up. He got out, came straight to PNG, got a work permit, and his whole crew was just doing illegal mining. And that really shows that this is, you know, not just criminal in the sense that it is a crime against the environment. This is also something that criminals do. The people doing this a lot of the time are, you know, your very stereotypical criminal types, you know, thugs who beat people up, who kill people, who shoot people. And you know, we see this replicated across the region. You know, sometimes it's small time, well, it looks like maybe small time guys. You know, sometimes when you're looking at things like fisheries, this is very sophisticated global activity, you know, which can get a lot of support from the state. Um, you know, again, if you're looking at, say, a lot of dubious mining practices, you know, this is something that, say, in Solomon's, re relies a lot on official corruption, you know, relies on, you know, the minister or an official on provincial level taking backhanders to allow for very destructive practices to happen, which really badly affect local people, you know, really badly affect local landowners, you know, poison their water, um, you know, poison their food, deprive them of royalties that should be going to help develop their communities, you know, if they choose to actually be involved in mining. So yes, I mean it can often seem when you're in the ground level that if there's some sort of environmental crime going on, that this is something local. It often gets pinned on, local artisanal miners or, local fishermen, going out and, going into a protected area or using dynamite or something like this, going after protected species. But it always feeds into a global supply chain, and the real money and the brains behind it is usually foreign in some way, working with local corrupt officials.
Virginia?
So do you mind if I jump in on this as well?
Of course.
Yeah, just to echo what Aubrey was saying, I think in our work we find that in some Pacific Island countries, actually environmental crime is where, well, the extractive industries is where most of the organized crime is actually happening in the form of organized crime. And it is foreign driven. And indeed, for instance, with regards to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, we know that China's fishing fleet is the #1 perpetrator around the world of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and that amounts to the largest, criminal activities in some of the Micronesian countries, for instance. And if I may, there was also a question about human trafficking. I think we can, bring it in this context, because lots of the human trafficking and just in general awful human exploitation that we see in the islands is often associated with the fishing, mining, and logging industry, because you have the exploitation of the workers. So lots of the fishermen on those boats are people from normally Southeast Asian countries who have their passport taken, and they spend a long time, maybe years, on a boat in terrible conditions, and sometimes they're just disposed of at sea. And then with regards to the logging and mining sites, the communities, the local communities near those sites, they are heavily affected. There are so many stories about, sexual exploitation of women, of children. There are all these, temporary marriages between local young women and foreign workers who, once their contracts are over, they go back to their Asian countries, and the women are left behind, often with children, which of course has an impact on their lives and the stigma associated with that, etc., etc. So I think we see around these industries, the extractive industry, we see the massive environmental impact, the corruption, and all the financial crime, and a huge amount of human exploitation. So I think there really are magnet for all sorts of awful things happening in the region.
Thank you so much, Virginia. Tevita, would you like to add something to?
And just very quickly, I think Virginia touched on it. It's the state embedded actors. Usually, to someone there's a fusion of crime, commerce, and foreign strategy. And everybody says, but how do we respond to the type of criminal law that can look into strategic investments? We don't have the capability. You can't look into that. These are foreign interference laws that prohibit covert funding and influence and operations that happen around us. These type of things. These just adds to the complexity of what we're talking about. They come in the guise of foreign aid. You can put them on the watch list because they're state-linked actors. But again, we really need to see this for what it is, and begin to shape a strategy that has regional influence, that has also national bearing. That's pragmatic enough but scalable enough to be able to address some of the fundamental issues that we have. And when we're talking about human trafficking, it's just not only the perpetrators, it's also the victims. How do you protect the victims? A lot of times the perpetrators, the laws protect more the perpetrators than the victims. How do you have this? Because it's the victim is the only witness. So these are some of the things that we need to see it for what it is, and help us to be able to shape how our policy needs to respond to this type of crimes.
Thank you very much, Tevita. Now I have a question, just very quickly, if we can just have a quick point from each one of the panel members, or maybe someone who would like to speak to this. And this is: has the collapse of USAID had a significant impact on civil society organizations in their ability to help combat transnational organized crime? Who would like to?
So less than you might think. So we started our work in the Pacific with US funding, and that has disappeared, but it was actually running out anyway. And we have other funding from other sources. So that's fine. I think the architects of the aid cuts would like to see bad effects to anti-corruption advocacy around the world. They don't like anti-corruption work. But unfortunately, at least in this part of the world, there is enough other donor support and initiatives, I think, that the work's going to go on. I think in some other parts of the world, yeah, it's definitely having an effect. In Eastern Europe, places like that, I think it's a lot grimmer. But we're still here, and whatever. It's nice not to actually have to deal with the Americans. No offense to any Americans on here, but it's nice not to get American money. Because then people can't, call you CIA.
Thank you very much, Aubrey. So I think we have time for one last question, and that's for all panel members. And it's: how can Pacific countries mobilize anti-corruption initiatives when the resources and investment come from external partners? Isn't that the reason the cycle of corruption persists? Is clientelism the issue? Tevita?
Maybe let's start with Virginia.
Virginia, hot potato?
Yes, thank you, Tevita. I thought we were friends. I mean, it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Because local actors, they need the financial support, but then what the person who posed the question suggests that maybe that support might come with string attached, and they might influence the work. Am I understanding that correctly? Well, I mean, I know it's easier said than done, especially in the current climate, but that really speaks to the need to diversify funding sources and not relying on a single source, because also it may lead to what Aubrey just mentioned a bit jokingly. If you get American money, you're accused of being CIA. Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme. It will not apply to every single civil society on the ground in the Pacific. But yeah, there is an issue related to impartiality and remaining neutral. But it's very hard not to rely on external sources for some of the smaller organizations. So I'm struggling to see an alternative, because also you could argue national governments could provide more funding, which is something that we argue for, but then there are some budgetary constraints related to that.
Thank you, Virginia. So unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our fantastic webinar. So I would like to thank our amazing speakers who have brought a breadth of experience and knowledge into this webinar, and hopefully been able to share with us and give us more of an insight into the issues of transnational organised crime from the 3 different lenses. And I think some of them which we haven't heard from or understood of before. I think looking at the issue of transnational organised crime, and in a lot of ways, it's always perceived as being a sort of a one level, the one tiered threat, and the response is always seen through a law enforcement perspective. And having the three of you here, with all of your experience, really helps us to understand that it's multi-tiered, that you require so many different lenses to understand the response, not just from a Western perspective or from a Pacific perspective, from money flows or from community or traditional power structures and media, but across and the breadth of all agencies, or some more of a holistic way of countering transnational crime and understanding transnational crime. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And I would like to hand over to Julie and thank Transparency International New Zealand for this amazing job and for this amazing opportunity for me to be part of this and to work with my three colleagues, which I know very well. It's a very small field in the Pacific, working in this area. So thank you very much. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much. What an excellent webinar and really fruitful discussion. Lots of things to think about. I know we didn't get to all the questions, and we'll ask our panel to have a look at those if they've got any comment on those in the second half. But just shows you the depth of people wanting to know more. So ngā mihi nui to our speakers and our facilitator, and to those who spread the word about our webinar series. Thank you to all those who've asked a question. Mihi kia koutou ngā pātai. And thank you so much for attending, because you really helped to make this a success. But there is more. There's more coming. Our third webinar is on beneficial ownership. And that's about knowing who controls companies and trusts and how wrongdoers benefit from secrecy and how that fuels corruption. That's coming up on 11th of June from 12 to 1:30. And again, you're booking through Humanitics if you haven't already. And it'll be facilitated by Emily Manuel from Open Ownership, speakers from UNDP and a young journalist from Vanuatu. And our two other series will follow on this year, one on women leadership in the Pacific and one on environmental governance. So I'm going to close with we close with a karakia usually in New Zealand. I'm of Irish descent, so I'm going to close with an Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you very much.